What is up, guys? You're listening to a August. Wow, can't believe it's August, but you're listening to an August edition of the Splash Tag Podcast. I'm joined today by Jason, regular, pretty regular guest now, and the NBA is back. It's been back. Today's the third day, and so we're just gonna shoot the shit about what we've seen in the bubble so far. And actually, the Lakers Raptors game is in the fourth quarter right now, and it's close. So as that kind of approaches crunch time, you'll hear some live reaction commentary. So without further ado, I'm joined by Jason. How you doing, man?
What up, man? We are back. The NBA is back. This I'm not sure if you feel the same way, but it feels like, that refreshing feeling when you go back to school, like after taking a summer off, or like just being able to get acquainted with things that are familiar, but it's like kind of new and kind of refreshing. Like this is exactly what I'm feeling.
Yeah, this. Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a good way to put it. I honestly, it reminds me a little bit of. This might be a stretch, but it honestly reminds me of that first Thursday of March Madness, because there's like games going on all afternoon, all until nighttime, and you're just bound to have some good games and whatnot. So I don't know, just so much basketball. I'm definitely happy that it's back.
Yeah, and you have to get acquainted with rosters again because you got a couple people who opted out, or a couple people who are like in quarantine or something. Like I was watching the Clippers game, and there was straight up one guy on the Clippers. I had no idea. And the worst part is they don't have the names on the back of the jersey, so you can't just look at the jersey and be like, oh,
That's right.
that's so and
Yeah, that's
so.
right.
Obviously, it's for a good message, but it makes it a bit harder to try to identify people that are on the floor. And in case you were wondering, there's this guy named Coffee on the Clippers. I had no idea
Amir
he
Coffee.
played.
Amir
Yeah,
Coffee. He he played for Minnesota in college.
yeah,
He played for Minnesota.
yep. I had to look that one up. I
Yeah.
was like, that does not look familiar. Am I? Is it like someone from the G League? And I guess it was just a second year or a rookie player from Minnesota. So
Something like that. Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good point. There is definitely, and I watch a lot of these guys in college, and obviously the NBA, and even like you said, like even there's moments where I'm like, yo, who number 15, and you go on Basketball Reference and you figure it out.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's been refreshing. It's been refreshing, and there's not that I'm surprised, but there's been a lot of high quality and either high quality or close, sometimes both, games. And so that's kind of, you at the end of the day, you want a game that's either close or very well played, and the ideal combination is both. So there's been a lot of that. So I'm just curious, on the note of, I guess I'll start it off with this. What to you has been the biggest highlight so far? Like, what have you enjoyed the most so far of the games you've seen?
I really have been enjoying just some guys who are just popping off. Like, it's not just a star-driven game per se. I think I've been most impressed with just there are a couple random guys who have just gone berserk in terms of shooting. I'm not sure if it's because you're not playing in like home stadiums, you're playing basically in a neutral court with no crowd noise. Maybe it's just easier for people to shoot, but I just watched a game where Trey Burke literally just could not miss from three. TJ Warren dropped like 50, 51 or something.
Just dropped
Uh,
53.
yeah,
53.
so
Yeah.
I'm really, really appreciating some surprise performances because it's a nice reminder that all players matter, and that just takes one person to have a really hot game to swing a match. So
Yeah.
as they're just
I
showing the rail cam on the
Yeah.
stream,
For
what
the
are your
Lakers Raptors game. Yeah.
what are your thoughts on the rail cam?
Um. I mean, I guess it makes sense to have. I mean, what is it? It just goes along. It kind of just cruises along the sideline, right?
Yeah, it's like a different
That's the
perspective.
view it gets.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I
it,
don't
it
mind
just
it.
goes to
I don't
show.
mind it.
I think I like it because it shows a little bit of a pace of the game, just kind of how people get back and the speed in which people are getting down the court. Um, and also just it puts into perspective, even though you're seeing it from like the side view, but just how crazy some of these passing angles are. Like I was watching like Luka and LeBron, and it's like there's no way I would have saw that opening happen and just be able to hit a like slick bounce pass or a no look pass. It's like, well, these are fast, right? Like,
Yeah. No, I definitely have enjoyed like seeing like different perspectives and angles, because obviously now there's not that one cameraman that's just sitting under the basket. Like
right.
That's definitely been refreshing. That's definitely been refreshing. Um, did you know that I was gonna say, so you talk about guys, being maybe scoring more potently, so to speak, because it's a little more a pickup setting in some ways. I'm curious I'm curious, like, who do you think is a guy that is a little under the radar that you think will really catch some really turn some heads in the bubble? I guess kind of going off of that point you made about how the bubble style might be more suited for some guys.
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely think you might see a Waiters Island a game. Just I think it really benefits people who are rhythm shooters or rhythm scorers who are basically these popcorn, like just will go off, and it seems like they can't miss. So like a Dion Waiters, I think specialist shooters like Troy Daniels on Denver. Because I remember he used to play for the Rockets, and he would just have nights where he just can't miss, right? So,
Yeah.
but guys who are probably, I'm thinking one dimensional. All they're there for is just get buckets, maybe not play great defense, things like that. Do you have any other players in mind?
Well, so I honestly think that, so kind of piggybacking off of that, one guy that I've seen play like, I obviously, you don't want to overreact to single games, but I was honestly really impressed with Gary Trent Jr. on Portland.
Oh, really?
Um,
Okay.
because he was playing. So first and foremost, when I watched him at Duke, I never thought he was I never thought he was a great defender, and yet he was being an absolute pest to John Morant in a very important game for Portland, because obviously Portland's the 9 and Memphis is the 8. And then he also hit some really timely threes. And to me, his shooting stroke has always looked pretty good to me. So if his defense has really improved, I definitely think that he'll be pretty important for this playoff push. Also, not to overreact to a single game, but Yusuf Nurkic looked pretty good for a guy who had a year off due to injury. Trying to think. Aside from the I guess moving away from Portland, I'm trying to think. What else have I watched? I guess for someone that I haven't necessarily watched yet, I wouldn't be surprised if one of the Miami shooters, Duncan Robinson or Tyler Hero,
Yeah,
has a game. They're in the absolute zone.
Yeah.
All it takes is
Duncan
one of those
Robinson
flamethrowers to go off. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess a guy under the radar that I think could be important as well is Dylan Brooks. I thought that he was he showed me quite a bit, I guess. I'd say starting in December, as the Grizzlies kind of started to really play better.
Yeah, and I was thinking some players on pretty bad teams like the Nets, like I could see a Jamal Crawford just like, oh, next thing I check ESPN, because obviously I'm not watching a Nets game, but I would not be surprised if I see on the ticker like, oh, Jamal Crawford dropped like 50. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool, that makes sense. Or maybe on the Wizards, I could see like one of the young Wizards going off like a Rui Hachimura game or a Troy Brown game, because there's not much talent, and they're probably just going to force feed some of these players. If you can remember when I think there was a game, the Suns against the Celtics, where like all they did was feed the ball to Devin Booker so he can get like 60 points or something, and they would just he was just taking atrocious shots, just trying to get his points total up. So I think those are a couple other big games I could see from some subpar teams because the talent's really not there and someone's really got to score the bucket.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a little bit of that. Not that this is obviously a good team; it's your team. But James Harden was on an absolute cooker, at least early yesterday. I definitely, like you said, without the fan noise and just kind of the neutral court aspect, I really could see this being more like a typical summer pickup run. Those ones that you see on YouTube, and a guy like James Harden, an absolutely elite all-time isolation scorer. I feel like that's where those types of players really, really can thrive. But it's been fun so far. I definitely wonder if seeing a lot of these really potent offensive performances is just kind of an early thing, and if defenses will adjust or if that'll persist. Because yesterday, De'Aaron Fox had 39 points. I think that's either his career high or it's up there. And the last time I saw him score 39 points was against UCLA in the Sweet 16. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think you can also remember that all these players, barring complications with COVID, they got rest, right? Like that was one thing I was thinking about
absolutely.
When I was watching opening night with LeBron. Like late game was really putting the clamps on both Paul George and Kawhi, and he was like really moving his feet, really getting active. And I was like, yeah, he's technically the hiatus was longer than like an off season, basically, right?
Yeah.
So everyone who load management, right? This is ideally, I guess, the best load management you can get, and it was really nice to see a very active LeBron putting the clamps, and it was kind of like a reminder of I'm still here, I'm still the king, right? Like nothing has changed. You might have forgotten me. Like everyone's now trending toward Giannis as like the best player in the league, but I like that little jab to the haters, I guess, that don't sleep on the Lakers, don't sleep on LeBron because he's still here.
Yeah, and what I will add to that is that was the first time, honestly, I've seen LeBron that engaged on defense. I honestly, maybe I sound like a hot take artist here, but I honestly haven't seen him like that engaged on defense. Maybe at least in I want to say like 2013.
Really? Ooh,
like oh yeah.
Hurt his shoulder. Nah, he'll be all right.
He's okay. He's okay. He's gonna be okay. He's
gonna be right.
He's an alien. He's an alien. Is it overreact? Do you think it's overreacting to say that LeBron on the offensive end, when they match up with the Clippers, LeBron has to work as harder than he ever basically harder than he has to against the Clippers? Because I have noticed that every time they play the Clippers and they're throwing PG Kawhi at him. Not that he's struggled offensively, although he did struggle offensively the other night. I have noticed that he works just a lot harder to get his points, and I wonder if that's something that will be to their detriment in the playoffs.
Yeah, but I think that's exactly why he has Anthony Davis, because Anthony Davis in the third quarter just went off. Like he was hitting threes. He was just unstoppable. I don't think anyone on the Clippers, if you're saying they're like the closest competitor to their path to the finals, there wasn't anyone that could really guard Anthony Davis. So I think LeBron's role on offense is more about shouldering, facilitating role. But I think he could defer to Anthony Davis, and I think he's totally fine with Anthony Davis, the one scoring all the buckets and taking more of the scoring load.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. Like the Clippers have as flexible, as deep and flexible as they are, their one hole is that they don't really have anyone that's gonna guard AD particularly well. Like, who's your best option? It's basically just Harrell, and then every couple minutes you throw in Noah to hack the shit out of him.
Exactly. I mean, you could put Paul
Zubac. Sorry.
You could, yeah, but I'm saying
Zubac?
if you wanted
Zubac is big, but I don't. Yeah.
if you need someone to handle the lateral ability of Anthony Davis, I think you could put Paul George or Kawhi, because they're big enough, I think, to be enough of a pest. Maybe not the full game, but if you're trying to lock in closing minutes, that could be an option there. One thing I also wanted to see your take on was whether or not if you had more of a younger team or an older team could benefit you more in the bubble. My theory is I think a veteran team actually is probably going to do better in the bubble, because I think they just are more resilient to the environment. And also, I think you have to remember these are like 8 pretty high pressure games, right? Like this is all related to seeding. This is all related to whether or not teams are making the playoffs. So I think these are some high pressure games that I think favor teams that have been there or have veteran players that know how to handle that type of stress and pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see what you're saying. I'm not really sure where I lean, because I can see an argument both ways, right? Because in the lockout years, which were, obviously unconventional years to say, and this is obviously a very unconventional year. In those years when there's, 3 games in 5 nights, and just, I guess, these quote weird circumstances, it's usually the younger teams that benefit from those. Like, for instance, in 2012, that's when the young Thunder went to the finals. In 1999, the 8-seeded New York Knicks went to the finals after Patrick Ewing got injured. So I don't know. I do think there is something to fresh young legs, and maybe the quote unquote experience not being as important, because, like you said, they're not playing in true road environments. But at the same time, it's also important to, like you said, these guys just had 4 months of rest. So even the veteran teams are going to be quote unquote well rested. So I don't really know if there's any advantage one way or the other.
Yeah, that's true. I guess we needed a couple more games to see it play out. But I was just thinking to the struggles of the Pelicans. Could this be due to you just got a lot of inexperienced players? They couldn't really close the game against the Jazz, even though they had leads. They got wiped out by the Clippers earlier today. And also when I was watching the Mavs versus Rockets game, the Mavs were red hot and they basically had the game in the bag, but they just really stagnated near the end and into overtime.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the end at the fourth quarter in overtime, and yeah, it was weird. They were absolutely cooking early, and then it might have seemed like, I don't know, they settled a little bit. Like Luka settled for some kind of, you could tell he was a little tired, and he settled for some, subpar shots. But I actually want to go back to you citing the Pelican struggles, because I don't. It's not a singular answer, but I want to ask you a question. And this, I didn't ask you this beforehand, so you have no idea what I'm about to ask. You might have to take a second to think about it. My question to you is, if you had to redraft the 2017 NBA draft today, would Lonzo Ball even go in the top 10?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have to see the draft. I can tell you right off the bat, I don't think he would go where he went. I think a lot more people were sold on his shooting back then, but I think now we know he maybe might not turn out to be a average or above average shooter. Let me look at the draft, but I will say I do like him. Okay. I did have some arguments earlier with a couple friends who swore that Lonzo Ball was better than D'Angelo Russell. And I was like, I still like D'Angelo Russell versus Lonzo Ball. So, yeah, I guess if we're looking at the draft, Markelle Fultz, this is the Markelle Fultz draft. Fultz, Ball, Tatum, Josh Jackson, De'Aaron Fox, Isaac, Markkanen, Frank Ntilikina, Malik Monk. Ooh, man, this is. So you're saying would he have went top 10?
I honestly think there's an argument he doesn't, and I know I sound like a hater. I'll explain myself in a second, but I think there's an argument where he goes maybe like 15th.
I think his argument's made. I think he goes like 9 or 10, like 8, 9 or 10 around that range because I think
Okay.
he's a serviceable player. Yeah, I guess if you want to practice exercise, who would you rather have from this draft over Lonzo, right? Like you can name basically the all-stars right off bat. So Tatum, Mitchell, Bam, 3.
You take Fox over him. You take Fox over him.
That's 4.
Would you take Lauri Markkanen?
That's a toss up. That's more of a like.
I would take Lauri Markkanen.
Okay. I would take Jonathan Isaac.
Jonathan Isaac. I would take Zach Collins over him.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, okay.
OG Anunoby.
That's where I draw. I think that's where I would draw. Like, okay, they're serviceable.
John Collins. Hold on. John Collins. Luke Kennard. Monty Morris. Dylan Brooks. Kyle Kuzma.
I wouldn't take Luke Kennard over Lonzo Ball.
Okay. Luke Kennard has a very serviceable NBA skill, though. That's very valuable.
Yeah, that's true. But I still think Lonzo is not going to be the leader of the team, but I think he's definitely serviceable. I think just recency bias, he just had a couple bad games, but he's a competent player. He's got good basketball IQ. He plays pretty solid defense. He knows how to facilitate. I think he would go again, end of probably like in the 8, 9, or 10 range. Really just a toss up between some of the other serviceable players. Like it's a toss up between like Lonzo Ball versus like Kyle Kuzma. Because all these players around here have a bit of flaws, right? Like OG Anunoby versus Lonzo Ball. I think it's a toss up. Like I'm seeing like Derek White versus Lonzo. It's a bit of a toss up.
I forgot about that's a toss up.
Oh, Jared Allen too. Wow, this is actually a pretty solid draft.
This is a good draft. Yeah, but I mean, I personally wouldn't take him in the top 10 in a redraft right now, and based on what I project from him, I don't mean to take a victory lap, but you talk about how some people were sold on his shooting. You know who was not sold on his shooting and actually told people that he was probably going to change his form once he went to the NBA? And you know who said that in 2017?
I don't know, you.
Yeah. I said back then, I said Lonzo, and not that I don't like Lonzo, because I think he's, like you said, he's a serviceable player, has very high basketball IQ, and is a very, very good passer. But I just didn't see a scenario where he was going to be a top 2 player in this draft, let alone back then. I said I don't even think he's going to be top 5. I've been on the De'Aaron Fox over Lonzo Ball hill for so long, and so many people have joined me, but I have been on that for so long. But anyhow, I will say this.
One last question.
Yeah.
Before you make your final point, who do you think ends up having a better career of the Ball brothers, Lonzo or LaMelo?
Ooh. Now, I've actually thought about doing like a podcast or an analysis about Lonzo versus LaMelo, because I actually think they're very different players. One thing I tell people when people ask me, the first thing I say is that the biggest difference I see in them is that Lonzo actually is not a great dribbler. Like for a starting point guard in the NBA, he's never really been a great dribbler because he tends to play hot potato with the basketball. He immediately dumps it off to the open man. Whereas the way I describe LaMelo, and one of his biggest strengths is that I call LaMelo, I say that he's Houdini with the basketball. Like you can throw a trap at him, you can jam him up with, multiple defenders. He always seems to find a way to escape out of those situations because his handle is so good. So that's one thing. They're so different. Gosh, I'm gonna go LaMelo.
Yeah, I think I'll have to make my final verdict once I know what team LaMelo plays for, because I think really where he starts off could influence how his development goes. If he plays for a team with good structure and has a good environment to develop his skills, then yes, I think LaMelo probably will have a better career, and I think he's got the tools to be better. I think he's slightly larger, slightly longer, and I agree with what you say about the ball handling. But if he plays for maybe a team, if he say for example he gets drafted to the Knicks, where he's just going to be chucking shots with RJ Barrett, and there's really no direction there, then probably not. But I guess if they hire Tibbs, then maybe he'll learn some defense. But again, what are the, I guess, the top lottery teams that he could possibly go to? Because I think he's going like basically top 3, top 5 bare minimum, right?
Yeah. Well, with the new odds, he really could go to a lot of different teams, but the highest odds would be what? Golden State, Cleveland, New York. Yeah, Golden State, Cleveland, New York, Minnesota. Yeah. No, not Minnesota. I don't think.
Yeah, so I guess if he goes to Golden State, then I think that's a great place for him to play. Learn under Clay, learn under Steph. Not a big emphasis for him to deliver impact immediately, and I think he can really develop his game.
Yeah, and where I think he'll develop good habits. But I'm curious. Well, actually, I had one Lonzo point. So that I don't know if you're aware of this. So let me ask you, as someone who is a, I'd say you probably have more Lonzo stock than me. I think one reason to be bullish. Actually, I'm curious. Are you familiar with? Let me see. Actually, let me ask you. Can you guess what reason I'm about to cite for why I think things will actually get better for Lonzo? And I'll give you a hint. It has nothing to do with his actual skill set.
Is it because he's distancing himself from his father?
No. I mean, I'm sure that helps, but no, that is not what I am citing. That was way too broad of a hint, but I don't know if you're aware, but the NBA is actually changing its ball from Spalding to Wilson in a couple years. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Yeah, okay, I remember that, and I don't think is there a big difference in the balls? I've never really played with either, so I've only heard from a couple of different sources.
I mean, there's definitely, at the end of the day, a shooter can shoot with any basketball, but there is definitely a different feel for each, right? And what's really interesting is if you look. I think Jonathan Tjarks from The Ringer. If it's not him, I apologize, but I think it was Tjarks. He actually did a couple years ago. He broke down Lonzo's shooting percentages based on the basketball. And when he was in high school and at UCLA, they basically had a lot of data on, Spalding ball versus the Wilson ball. And this dude, his college stats, like he shoots like 55% from 3, like, or something crazy, right? It turns out that a lot of his shooting percentages were a lot better with the Wilson balls, and his percentages were absolute garbage with the Spalding ball. And in the NBA, they use the Spalding ball. So I don't know if that's a coincidence, but I wouldn't say that's the only reason. His slingshot form was bound to struggle anyway, but I do think that'll help.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that sounds reasonable. I think there are some other characteristics in there because I think maybe the defense in college wasn't as good. Plus, I think the 3-point line in college is shorter than the NBA, right?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a factor too. Although at UCLA he was launching it from way back, but
but I think back in UCLA he was probably shooting with confidence. So I would say
that too.
That could be true. That could be true, but I think there might be a little bit noise in the differences. But yeah, I would love for him if change the ball because I'm still a big fan of Lonzo. I want to see him succeed. I want him to grow as well as Zion and Brandon Ingram in New Orleans because I really do like the core that they have there on paper, and I would love to see them really fulfill the potential that's there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's. I'm not saying that the ball alone is going to change things drastically, but I'm sure it'll help given the large aggregate of data that's already out there that suggests that it should help. But yeah. Anyhow, enough about Lonzo. I was gonna say, isn't it a little? It's a little bit of a bummer that literally right when we tuned into that Lakers Raptors game, it became kind of a dud.
Yeah, I just remember seeing. I think they're pulled away, and you saw Dion Waiters launch a three, and it hit like the net, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's the Dion Waiters I know, not the guy that was like just getting some clutch buckets against the Clippers.
Yeah. Yeah, time out though. Dion Waiters was signed as a substitute player, and yet he was playing in crunch time.
Yeah, I think they were just riding with a hot hand at the time. So I think what was the crunch time lineup?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, he actually was signed before the shutdown, but still, I was just surprised to see him get to be out there in crunch time, which actually leads me to my next question. Let's say Rondo comes back full health, no injuries in the bubble, obviously no Avery Bradley. If you're Frank Vogel, who's your crunch time five?
Ooh, so let's key the locks, right? LeBron, AD. I would throw Kuzma in there because you want to say Kuzma is liability on D, but I think he played some pretty solid defense on Kawhi against the Clippers, so I'll throw him in there. I guess between Rondo, I guess it's a toss up between Rondo, KCP. I'll throw in
Danny Green.
Oh yeah, okay. Obviously, Danny Green. Sorry,
Danny Green's a lock. Danny Green's a lock.
It's definitely a lock. So I guess what you're looking there is a toss up between Rondo and Caruso and KCP. I guess whoever
or Waiters
or Waiters. I think it really depends on who's playing well.
Okay.
And matchup wise, are you trying to get bigger or are you trying to get smaller? Because it really depends on whether or not you're playing a guard heavy team. Like if, say for example, in the first round they're playing against like a Portland, or if they were playing more of like a Memphis or something like that.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's definitely going to be matchup dependent. But yeah, that fifth guy is definitely there's wiggle room for them there. I know a lot of people want to see it be Caruso, but I like you said, I agree with you that it'll probably depend on the matchup. Also, just a fun fact: did you know that the last time Rondo was in the playoffs, so that was 2018, he averaged a career high in the playoffs in terms of assists per game?
Yeah, that was when he was playing for the Pelicans, and that's when they upsetted the Trailblazers, right? Where they just put on a defensive clinic against CJ and Dame.
Yeah. But yeah, playoff Rondo is a real thing.
Well, I mean, I watched him give up when he played for the Mavericks against the Rockets, and
that's true. That's true. That's also true.
What a weird part of his career. He's really gone a long way from like how many teams has he played for at this point? He's played for the Celtics, the Bulls,
Boston,
the Mavericks,
Dallas, Chicago,
the Bulls,
Sacramento,
Pelicans.
Sacramento, New Orleans.
Ooh, yeah, Sacramento, New Orleans, and now the Lakers. Wow, 7 teams.
6 teams.
Right? Sorry.
6 teams total.
Celtics, Mavs, Pelicans,
Kings, Bulls, Lakers.
Bulls. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Anyhow, another question. I guess we're kind of closing in, trying to wrap up soon. One more question that I have for you is, I guess just based on what you've seen so far, quick hit. Who do you think grabs that? Who do you think grabs the finishes 8 and 9 in the West, and then in that hypothetical 8-9, who do you think gets the final playoff spot?
All right. I think just from a 1 or 2 game sample size, I think it's gonna be the Trailblazers against the Memphis Grizzlies. That's what I'm gonna.
I agree with you there.
That's what I want to see. To be honest, well, I want to see the Pelicans, but they played some really subpar basketball, and it's really disheartening. But I guess I think the Grizzlies versus the Trailblazers, and I want the Trailblazers to win, so to set up this really good matchup against the Lakers versus the Resurgence, and finally healthy Blazers.
Blazers, yeah.
Would love to see how
LeBron,
the Lakers match up against CJ and Dame, and then now you have a LeBron versus Carmelo that we've all been waiting for.
LeBron v. Melo.
Yeah,
LeBron v. Melo. Yeah, I probably have to agree with you in terms of how that plays out. But the final thing that I'll add. So you mentioned wanting the Pelicans that you like are deep down pulling for the Pelicans to reach 9 and then get into the play-in. I'm gonna say this, not try to be too overreactionary, but I'm a little frustrated with how not Alvin Gentry, but how I'm a little frustrated with that organization and how they've been handling stuff. So I'm gonna just say it now. I would rather see the Kings in the play-in than the Pelicans.
Yeah, that's true. I think no, I still think there's just more star talent in the Pelicans, because I guess the whole point of getting into the play-in is to get a good matchup and try to upset the Lakers. I just think the upside is there with the Pelicans if they can just really figure it out. But I agree with you. I think Alvin Gentry is on the hot seat at the very least. He might get a mulligan in terms of this was just such a weird season and he needs just one more year where he has a pretty healthy Zion and they can really unleash him. But he's definitely on the hot seat for me in terms of getting fired in the near future.
Yeah, that can be a conversation for another day. I think that's a good place to wrap it up, though. I think we're in agreement about the potential 8-9 and kind of what we want to see come from that whole new wrinkle of this restart. But yeah, so I guess that's a good place to wrap up. I want to thank you for joining me, Jason, and then on top of that, to those listening, appreciate you listening. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe on whatever medium you're listening. So whether that's Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, or YouTube. You'll hear from me soon. And once again, thanks for joining me, Jason.
Yep, appreciate it, man.